Hello, this is your Wednesday lecture. It's coming a bit late on Wednesday. It's already Wednesday night, so I hope you weren't looking for it earlier. I'm going to talk a little bit about this organization assignment this week, which is a poetry imitation, and I'm going to try to explain the context for it, why it is helpful, I think, and then I'll show you a model at the end of all of this. So the standard really that drives this assignment is structure. 3C in the world of AP literature. So we're going to the third standard of our 7, and that third standard is all about structure, how something is designed. The key questions when it comes to poetry are similar to what we'll use with prose. To what degree does the poem's ordering of events follow something linear or something logical? To what degree is it nonlinear or maybe snapshots, something avant-garde? Poetry can do so many things in the world of structure. So the first step is just identifying what is this structure. And then what do we gain by that structure? What do we lose? What sort of complexity does the structure add? Why would the author select that structure over all others? Especially in the world of poetry, the structure is intentional. It is maybe half, if not more than half, of the meaning and the message. So we really have to deeply understand why the poet is choosing that particular form. And I like starting the world of form with your own expressions. I like to see your own poetry, and I like to see how you play with structure, because that's where you begin to really feel why this matters. But we're pairing that with a poetry imitation. So I'm asking you to have picked a poet this week that you study and a poem really that you've studied, and that will be your inspiration for how you're going to structure your poem. I think this is good. It challenges us. It always challenges me when I try to write in a form that it's not necessarily comfortable to me, or it's not the way I would have thought to do something. It forces me to really think about what I'm trying to say. Not that you wouldn't do that anyway in your poetry, but it's sort of like a positive drill that you might do in the world of athletics that works a certain muscle that you wouldn't otherwise work. So that's why structure is really the inspiration for this assignment. The organization of a poem, like I said, it's critical to understanding what the message is. So what I'd like you to do, you don't have to do this in your post, but I asked you earlier to collapse your line endings on the poem. Put it back together again. Look at the real poem or the original poem when you're thinking about this assignment, because structure is everything. And as you look at the poem, I want you to think about these questions. You don't have to write them down for me. This is for you to think about as you begin crafting your own poem. Your grasp of these questions and their answers will help you as you try to design your own. So think about line endings. Why do the breaks happen where they do? Where do they break? How long are the sentences? Are they varied, short, long? There's a pattern there, probably. What's the punctuation that guides the poem? The periods at the end of the line? Are they in the middle of the line? Are there even periods? What other punctuation is there? And then how all of that works on the message of the poem. That's what you're really trying to get at. So with this in mind, you will then go to a blank sheet and you'll write your own poems. Your task is to write your very own poem in the style of the poem you studied. You don't necessarily have to use the exact same length. If you picked Waiting, that's only 2 stanzas. Maybe you want to write a third, that's fine. If you picked Lee Young Lee, that's kind of the longer poem that we have this week. Maybe yours is 2/3 as long, that's fine. It's just that your poem is stylistically the same. The topic of your poem, it can be anything you want, but you're constrained by trying to honor the tone and the purpose of the poem that you read. It doesn't have to be the exact same message, but there's probably a theme that drives that poem. There is a theme. I just won't know what it is. You'll get to decide. And your poem should also honor that theme. And I'll try to show you a model of that. This is yet another constraint. It is me saying, you can't write about just anything. You've got to also write about that thing. And why? Well, if the poet chose that structure to communicate this message, then by that logic, you should take that same kind of message when you use that structure. I'm asking you to post your poem on our discussion board and in your BGD. We will read each other's. These are public. And then after you've put your poem on there on the post, also write a little paragraph. Just tell us what you're trying to do. It can be personal, it doesn't have to be, it can be short, it can be long. It's just your chance to explain something that we wouldn't necessarily get. It's the beauty of being in a room with each other where we can talk about the poems we write. We're not just publishing them and asking the readers to make sense of them. It's not a formal paragraph. Okay, so here I'm moving into my model of this. Okay, I'm picking my model for the week. Charles writes, "The ghost of Walter Benjamin walks at midnight." So that poem is in my mind as I answer these questions, as I try to figure out, what am I going to do? Line endings. Where do they break? Well, Charles Wright has a collection of poems called sestets, and that's where this appears. So I know he thinks it's a sestet. It's a 6-line poem. And that's really interesting because he's choosing to break the lines across the page to maintain those 6 lines. The margins are pulled to different places, though. It's not like they're all left margined, flushed on the left, and then there's a few that are flushed over here. They're scattershot. They're jagged. And I'm sort of guessing, I'm supposing that that supports the message. The farthest one over is the last line, which is where he says, we'll never speak the same language, essentially. And so maybe he's trying to say that's the farthest we are from each other. And the whole spirit of the jagged edges suggests this breakdown in our communication. How long are the sentences? They start short, they start more simple, and the last stanza is just one long sentence. And to me, that suggests the pull to explain the phenomenon of not being able to communicate. It gets stronger. The pull gets more panicked. The pull makes the sentence longer. I know that feeling. Communication or punctuation guides the poem through commas. And some periods, the periods though are always flushed to the right. Commas are the main thing that he's using to break the line. So it's this speed, this sense of urgency. And then why does all of that matter? All of this coming together, I'm saying the poem itself is broken in structure, just like communication is. There are breakdowns in the structure. There are breakdowns in the way that we can truly connect with one another. There are 2 halves to his poem, the right margin, the left margin, but they do mirror one another. So there is an attempt at a genuine agreement. There is movement here towards that divinity, as he calls it. It's not perfect, but we never will be. All we can do is get closer. I'm thinking of math now and like asymptotes. That's what this poem reminds me of. So in thinking about what I want to write about, I want to honor that. I'm going to write a poem about my attempts to communicate with someone in my life and the ways that we just aren't understanding one another. It's not tragic. It's just true that there's much more that I want to say than I'm able to say. And so I'm going to try that with my poem, which is called Vicarious. And I'll click on it here and show you both Wright's poem and then my poem below it. Here's Wright's poem. You can see those lines that I'm talking about, how they're pulled to different sides. I'm going to try to do that myself. And then there's a sestet, there's 6 lines. I couldn't keep myself to 6 lines, so it's 9. So here you can see visually, I've got those staggered lines. I'm trying to break across the page like Wright does. I'm trying to create 2 halves. There's this right margin half that's unsure and yet really excited about what it is that that speaker has to say. And then on the left margin, it's the more simple communication, the more basic thoughts. So they live as 2 halves of the same perspective. And by the end, I hope they come together into a whole. All right, I'm going to read it. I really don't know much about flowers, but with you, I am not embarrassed. I drop down. See this here, I say. The purple spreads out like iris dye on medieval stained glass. It fills each vein like a brook swells with rain. Only metaphors have stuck with me. But I must try. You could be a botanist, a lover of violets. You're turning it with careful hands. I'm sorry about this. There is much to teach you, and much of it I don't know. It's sweet that you think I do. I'm sorry for the day you will see how at one point I reached the end of what I know about flowers. Start where I leave off. It's not that I want you to be greater than anyone else, just greater than me. So, Vicarious, it's a poem to my son. the ways that parents feel about their kids. And there is so much that I just won't be able to say well in my whole life. I already know that. But in this poem, I'm trying to capture that essence of why I feel a disconnect. I don't want him in this poem. I don't want the subject to feel like there's this undue pressure on them, but I also want them to be so much more than I could be. And that is itself a disjointed message. It's itself full of contradictions. So my attempt, and I'm so excited to see y'all's. So enjoy and let me know if you struggle at any point with the assignment, but mostly I hope that you take it as an opportunity for creative expression and a chance to exercise your voice in a different way. Okay, that's it. Except I can't stop it.